houses tucked away in the woods, perched on the edges of cliffs, and even homes located underneath the waves. In today's video, we're taking a look at the top 15 coolest houses in the world. Number 15. Guaruja Rainforest House. How cool would it be to live out your ultimate Jungle Book fantasy and be surrounded by hanging vines, giant otherworldly leaves, and be woken up every morning to the sounds of tropical birds? Well, a place like that really does exist, and so the Rainforest House in Guaruja, Brazil is truly a tropical dream come true. It's sitting on the mountainside overlooking the Atlantic Ocean and surrounded by greenery on 3 sides. Designed by Studio MK27, they wanted this home to look like it's part of the jungle itself, and boy did they deliver. Coming up to the jungle abode, you'll walk up the stone steps with gorgeous plants on both sides and come up to the concrete and wooden structure that looks like it was built by a more advanced Tarzan. The interior has a more contemporary look, so the residents won't miss their urban lives too much. But when you come up to the roof, that's where the magic really is. The roof of the Rainforest House holds 2 levels of decks, where the upper level has a small green area that grows a little less wild than the surrounding jungle. And the lower deck holds the infinity pool, hot tub, and fire pit. When you're in the Guaruja Rainforest House, it's pretty hard not to feel like the king or queen of the jungle. Number 14. Mehmet Ali Gökçeoğlu Home. Chances are you've never heard the name Mehmet Ali Gökçeoğlu, but he's an incredibly successful and wealthy businessman and engineer from Turkey who has an eye for style as well. As you can probably imagine, Mehmet lives in an absurdly large, lavish home in Çeşme, Turkey, but woke up one morning with a great idea to take his home to the next level. Using his expertise in structural engineering, Mehmet took the 164-foot fence that lined much of the property and replaced it with a 164-foot aquarium. Mehmet replaced his fence back in 2005 and filled it with 1,000 different exotic fish, including some sea breams, eels, and even octopus. He quickly became the talk of the town as word spread. Mehmet's aquatic wonderland became a very popular tourist attraction. But how do you keep something like that safe? With so many fish exposed out in the open, could anyone just walk right up and take an octopus from the fishy fence? Not a chance, because Mehmet also installed 17 security cameras along the fence, complete with facial recognition technology to keep his 1,000 most prized possessions safe. Number 13. The Keret House. Whoever lives in the Keret House can tell all of their friends that they live in the narrowest house in Warsaw, Poland. Tucked very, very snugly between 2 buildings, this seemingly impossible architectural feat is the work of local architect Jakub Szczesny, who first presented his skinny idea during an art festival in 2009. Cut to 2012 and his vision became a reality, even garnering some international attention. And while this technically may be a residence, it's more of an art installation if anything, with the widest point measuring just 4 feet across. And while the home may be rail thin, people will tell you that because space builds upwards in the Keret House, it may not be as claustrophobic as you'd think, especially with all of the natural light it gets in there. This little plot of land, if you can even call it that, measures just 3 feet across at its narrowest point, making one strange piece of real estate that most people would just simply overlook. But despite the sheer lack of space, the Keret House is fully functional and ready to be lived in. Just don't expect to have a dinner party in there anytime soon. Number 12. The Heliodome. Living out in the French countryside certainly has its perks. You're away from the hubbub of the city, you're surrounded by picturesque landscapes, you've got good wine, and you probably live in a quaint little cottage. That is, unless you're living in the Heliodome. Built by Eric Wasser, the Heliodome is a futuristic-looking sundial-shaped home that harnesses the power of the sun to keep the lights on and reduce its carbon footprint. And while all of that is certainly a nice idea, the Heliodome looks like a UFO that crashed to Earth. A cabinet maker by trade, Wasser decided to apply his carpentry skills to a new home, so he calculated how to build the house on an angle while keeping the frame upright, and the Heliodome is the final product. Wasser has gone on to say that the tilt of the house provides for some quality shade in the warmer months, and even though the sun is lower on the horizon in the winter months, it captures the perfect amount of sunlight to keep the place warm and toasty. Even the Heliodome's interiors are stunning, and you can find much of Wasser's handiwork throughout, but that interior is still a little bit tough to get over. Number 11. The Mesa Vista Ranch. The Mesa Vista Ranch in the Texas Panhandle is absolutely stunning. It's ridiculously big, sure, but still stunning. The property of the late American oil mogul T. Boone Pickens, the Mesa Vista Ranch sits on about 65,000 acres of land and functions a lot more like its own small town. Boone lived on his ranch for close to 50 years, and during that time built all sorts of amenities both in and around the main house. So, for starters, there's 20 man-made streams and lakes that he was able to enjoy as part of his conservation efforts towards the area that make for an amazing southern oasis. And seeing as how there's so much property, you can bet that there are multiple abodes to choose from. There's the main multi-structured lodge compound that essentially acts as an on-site hotel for guests. And then if you hop in the golf cart and drive 6 miles southwest, you'll find the Lake House with close to 12,000 square feet of space. The entire compound is absolutely massive, and it's amazing to think that it's really just one man's house. But the Mesa Vista Ranch also keeps things interesting with its 11,000 square foot dog kennel, a chapel, golf fairways and greens, and then even a private airport and even a pub. It's not a bad deal considering the entire estate costs only $250 million. Number 10. The Chemosphere. The 1960s were a wild time in the West. The youth were trying out new forward ways of thinking, the civil rights movement was in full effect in the United States, and people were experimenting with all sorts of things, even architecture. The Chemosphere was designed as a modern abode in Los Angeles, California in 1960 by John Lautner. At the time, Lautner was applauded by critics and experts for the octagonal design, but the rest of us were left scratching our heads and shaking in fear because his Chemosphere seems to float on the air over the hills below. The Chemosphere looks like a UFO trying to land in the rough terrain of LA's hills. So what exactly is going on here? When Lautner surveyed the area the Chemosphere sits on, he was given two options: level out the sloped land, which would take too much time and even more money, not to mention hurt the ecosystem, or just build a single 30-foot column to support the house, which is what gives it its hovering appearance. He obviously chose the latter, which only cost 30 grand. And while Lautner would assure that the house is fine, it's not hard to be left shaking in your boots once you're inside this thing. And despite the fear, the Chemosphere is now worth well over $3 million. Number 9. Tetsu Treehouse. Although much of Japan may be associated with the neon dreams of something like Blade Runner, so much more of the country and culture is about bringing it all back to nature. Many of the people here have been able to strike a balance with the country's modernization and their Shinto roots, believing that nature still has power and presence in our everyday lives. Terunobu Fujimori is a profound Japanese architect and designer known for embodying this mindset in his creations, and his Tetsuo Treehouse really takes the cake. His treehouse in Hokuto, Japan is a one-of-a-kind, sitting right amidst the cherry blossom trees for which the country is known for. It's situated atop a lone cypress tree surrounded by the pink hues of the blossoms. It's just stunning, and the surroundings will have you regurgitating poetry in no time. From the outside, the Tetsu Treehouse has a very minimal look, but the interior is just as stunning. The interior walls are incredibly smooth and the floor resembles a traditional tatami mat, while the ceiling looks like it's held up by the perfectly sanded down trees acting as columns. Make sure to pay this place a visit during the next cherry blossom season. Number 8. Cliff Haven. The Cliff Haven house looks like the perfect space for your modern Stone Age family. Nestled nice and snug into the rocks of Montezuma Canyon in the gorgeous state of Utah, this aptly named hidden haven in the cliffs looks pretty remote and feels pretty remote, but it's only a 20-minute drive away from the closest town. So while you're provided all of the luxuries that come with living in such a stone-faced seclusion, all of the perks and amenities of the modern world are still within reach. It's hard to tell from the outside, but Utah's Cliff Haven encompasses 2,100 square feet of space. The interiors themselves have a nice south-of-the-border feel to them and your typical 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. But then there's the 3-car garage for your own car and dune buggies. And while Cliff Haven is by no means a mansion, it's the entire property itself that's the biggest seller here because the owner has the surrounding 12 acres of red rock to themselves. It's another home that's hidden in plain sight, and if the neighbors want to come by and ask for a cup of sugar, they're going to need to make that mile walk first, but then finding the place is still a task unto itself. Number 7. Aura House. Although it may be overrun with tourists and expats all wealthier than the indigenous population, Bali is a tropical paradise full of rich history, culture, food, and architecture. And in the bamboo forest along the Ayong River, just 30 minutes south of the hipster haven Ubud, is the Aura House. Part of the Green Village development, the Aura House is unlike anything you've ever seen. This home in paradise combines the sheer magnificence of human ingenuity and Mother Earth with sustainability, having been crafted by local bamboo and surrounded by the lush Indonesian jungle. This 3-story treehouse holds 2 ensuite bedrooms, a kitchen, and in true Balinese fashion, an open-air living room totally clad in bamboo and decorated with locally handcrafted furniture. The wraparound terrace here is made of, you guessed it, bamboo and offers some of the best views of the Ayong River that money can buy. And don't forget about the private pool. Bali is truly one of the most unique, beautiful, and culturally rich places in the entire world, and so it should make perfect sense that you find the spellbinding and mystical Aura House here. The Aura House in Bali is the perfect place for anyone looking to fulfill their eat, pray, love jungle palace fantasy. Number 6. Versace Mansion. It may not be what it once was, but the Versace Mansion in Miami Beach, Florida has thousands of stories to tell within those walls. When Gianni Versace purchased this 60-year-old villa, it needed some serious updates, and of course the world-famous designer was up to the task. He took what was originally a 24-apartment villa and converted it into a single home, complete with 10 bedrooms and bathrooms, 2 kitchens, a bar, a library, and 3 living rooms. And because that wasn't enough for him, the Italian fashion mogul had a 6,100 square foot addition built that included a gym, steam room, and a shower big enough for 8 people. How much did all this run him? Well, a whopping $32 million. Today's millionaires and billionaires can buy a brand new mansion for that kind of cash. But Gianni Versace knew he was meant to own this historic villa. When you made your way past the villa's famous bedrooms like the Venus and Medallion suites, there was an observatory on the 3rd floor. The room's domed ceiling was painted a beautiful deep blue and dotted with gold stars, letting his guests feel like they were one with the cosmos. This observatory has become so famous that allegedly even Drake took advantage of the acoustics, recording music inside. Number 5. Tree-Ness House. Japan is an awesome country, but they've seemed to run out of space in the last few decades. And while their birth rate has come to a grinding halt, people are still living on top of each other, which is why design firms are coming up with great new ideas to keep what little space folks do have as functional as possible. Enter the Tree-Ness House. Designed by the architect Akihisa Harata, they took their love of trees to create a futuristic abode that blends both city living with nature. The Tree-Ness House is meant to look like a tree, with the base of the structure acting as a trunk and the rest of the building jutting out like branches and leaves across 3,500 square feet of space. Everything here is stacked on top of each other in a 3-dimensional space, giving a literal meaning to the term eye-popping. And while the Tree-Ness home is made of concrete, there are plenty of intricate garden areas to be found and even staircases that seem to hang off the building's edges, because who says you can't be outside while you're inside? Number 4. Nagano Shell House. Hopefully in the future, we will all be living in homes that embody a more natural aesthetic, and that's exactly what the Shell House accomplishes. Designed by Kotaro Ide to look like a conch shell, construction on the Shell House finished in 2008, and the finished product looks absolutely stunning. This home sits in the middle of the woods of the Nagano Prefecture in Japan, and it's made of 2 gorgeously smooth white elliptical shapes that literally makes it look like a spaceship ready for launch. And there are very few sharp angles here, giving this abode a gentler, more sleek look. And while there may be a somewhat stark contrast between the home itself and its natural surroundings, it's one of the few homes on this earth that's able to both stand out and yet blend into the woods around it. It feels as if it's meant to be there, which is what you'll be saying about yourself once you see the interiors. A mix of concrete and stone, the inside of the Shell House is built to withstand not just Japan's humid summers, but the region's cold winters too. This house is quite literally built to last, opting for materials that won't decay over time due to the weather. The Shell House is quite literally built to last and will surely outlive us all. Number 3. The Flintstone House. The Flintstones was a great show. It had some silly movies, but we're all around a solid family. But that doesn't mean that anyone should truly bring them to life. Apparently, that's exactly what William Nicholson did when he built a real-life Flintstones house in Hillsborough, California in 1976. The entire home is about 2,700 square feet and was made by spraying concrete onto steel rebar and wire mesh frame over inflated aeronautical balloons. An incredibly ambitious endeavor, no doubt. It's tough to believe that something like the Flintstone House can even exist. And while it may be one of the coolest looking houses in the world, there's no denying the fact that it is very, very untraditional, to say the least. In fact, it looked so wild that many of the neighbors complained so many times that a local architectural review board was formed. The most recent complaint was in 2019 when the town of Hillsborough filed a complaint against the current owner, stating their modifications were not only a public nuisance, but weren't made up to code. It's insane to think that a house like this actually exists and wasn't built originally as a movie set. And while I certainly hope the Flintstone House residents are happy, I think we can all agree that this is one wild-looking house. Number 2. Fallingwater. You just can't have a list of stunning homes in amazing locations without talking about Frank Lloyd Wright. The world-renowned architect has helped erect plenty of amazing houses, but his Fallingwater really takes the cake. Wright's Fallingwater can be found in Pennsylvania and stands out from our other entries because instead of overlooking the turquoise waters of the sea or the serene currents of a lake, this one sits right on top of a waterfall, hence the name Fallingwater. Designed in 1935, Wright's water home sits in the Laurel Highlands and is built from the native sandstone found in the area. Fallingwater became the vacation home of a wealthy family who passed the property down from one generation to the next before donating not just the home, but the 469 acres of land generally untouched by man to the nonprofit Western Pennsylvania Conservatory. Luckily for the rest of us, that means the Fallingwater home is open to the public, operating as a museum. Number 1. Floating Seahorse. Leave it to Dubai to come up with one of the most insane yet extravagant houses in history. While it's certainly no Burj Khalifa, the Floating Seahorse isn't beachfront property. It's quite literally right on the water. This floating home is built in the World Islands, the man-made islands meant to mimic the map of the world. Designed by the Kleindienst Group, their home on the water took more than 5,000 hours of research and another 13,000 hours of design and engineering to get it just right. Because what good is a house on the water if it sinks? The plans for these floating sea houses were announced in 2016, and the hype is very real, with 60 units having been sold before they were even complete. And how much is each one of these Seahorse sea houses going for? You're looking at about $12 million. But these homes are more like icebergs because so much of them are actually underwater, which is where you'll find the master bedroom and bathroom all across 270 square feet. And to make things a little more interesting, the sub-level features floor-to-ceiling windows where you'll be able to look out at your own personal 500-square-foot coral garden. Watch our binge-watching playlist if you'd like to watch all of our most popular top 15 videos. Grab a drink, grab a snack, and get ready to binge.